Okay, so AJ hit me up with something really interesting, right? It's a new documentary called The Last of the Winthrops. Now, Winthrop, that's a name you hear, right? It's attached to, British history, American history, but I haven't, I've heard the name, there's references to it, but I don't know the history, like the lineage of it all. I mean, on the website for the film, there is like a family tree, which is pretty what I mean, pretty fascinating because it gives you all these people that are connected to the Winthrops, and you're like, wait, what? Really? That's crazy. You know what I mean? There's like actors and just all manner of people. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things which I think you don't always know, right? But it's there's a lot involved. You know what I mean? There's a lot involved to it all, which kind of blows your mind a little. Yeah, I mean, just a few, right? So Christopher Reeve, right? Superman is a relative of the Winthrops. John Quincy Adams, Amelia Earhart, Bill Gates, Tom Selleck, Vic Van Dyke, Janis Joplin, Chevy Chase, Edward Snowden, Post Malone, right? T.S. Eliot. It's fascinating. It really is. When you look at it like that. So this documentary, it is written and directed by Viviane Winthrop and Adam K. Singer, and Christopher Seward helps with the writing as well. Okay, so producing it, we've got Adam K. Singer. Executive producing is Vivian. Douglas Blush. Associate production is Brianna Bell. And co-production is Sergio Miranda. The music is handled by Shi Rosawa. Cinematography is Eduardo Cervello. Sergio Miranda also edits the film. Sound, all of that is Chris Gridley, Ash Sutton, and Tony Villafleur. Visual effects, we got Gabriel Chase, Alan De La Rosa, James Poirier, and Alexei Trehoff. Jonathan Villages also helps with editing. And in the film, we have got, obviously, there's Viviane Winthrop. She's there. Her mother, Claire Winthrop. Her best friend, Andre Metcalf. Then we've got Bill Beagle, David Blackburn, Xavier Gerard de Saint-Eymart, Cecilia Heritage, Rick Larson, Jason Noto, Brian Bella Schellenberg. There's other kind of Winthrop relatives like Bertram Winthrop or Bertram Durand, who it was her father's brother, if I remember correctly. And then we've got the Perez's, right? So Lillian Perez Weinstein, who we first come across. Then there's Monica Perez, Jacques Perez, Danny Perez, Andrew Perez. There's a lot of Perez's. So yeah, the gist of the piece is this: when Reginald Winthrop and his beautiful French Canadian wife Claire had their miracle child, Viviane, they raised her as an heir to the historic Winthrop exceptionalism. Reg could follow the Winthrop heritage down a very prestigious path to the founders of America. However, after Reg's passing, Viviane is compelled to take her own journey down that path and learn everything she can about the Winthrop lineage until an ancestry DNA result sends all her plans into upheaval. Born in the 1580s, John Winthrop was one of the leading figures in founding the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Winthrop led the first large wave of colonists from England in 1630, and he went on to serve as governor. His writings and vision of the colony as a Puritan city upon a hill dominated New England colonial development, influencing the governments and the religions of neighboring colonies for centuries to come. As for present day descendants, the list ranges from political heavy hitters to pop culture royalty to literature royalty. The late Christopher Reeves was a 10th great grandson, and Secretary John Kerry is an 8th great grandson. The Winthrop family tree additionally branches out to pilot Amelia Earhart, tech titan and philanthropist Bill Gates, icon Dick Van Dyke, iconologist Edward Snowden, Duchess of York Sarah Ferguson, legendary singer-songwriter James Taylor, and multi-award winning rapper Post Malone, which is to say nothing of the towns, buildings, educational institutions, and monuments built and named in honor of the Winthrops. Moving fluidly between past and present through archival footage, private letters, and recordings, The Last of the Winthrops follows Viviane Winthrop on a journey she did not plan for, across 5 countries and hundreds of years to find out who she thought she was, and in the end, who she actually is. So, yeah, right, there's a lot there. This is, what this really reminds me of? It reminds me of Icarus. Now, if you haven't seen Icarus, you need to watch Icarus. It's fascinating. It was a documentary about bike racing, cycling. Right, I was thinking bike racing. I don't think that's the name, right? Cycling. And there was a guy that wanted to see, because I think it was after the Lance Armstrong, all of that broke and everything, and then just finding out that basically everyone dopes in cycling. Like, I think the crazy thing about the Lance Armstrong thing is that I believe when they stripped him of his medals and were like, well, we're all the next person. I think they had to go to something crazy. Now, I'm not saying this is exactly correct, but I think it was something like, I don't know, 15th place, 20th place to find someone who had a clean sample. right? Because everyone does it, which, if everyone's doing it, it does kind of seem like, well, fuck it. Because when you look at the wear and tear, it's kind of crazy. So this guy, I think it was Brian Fogel, he wanted to kind of see how he would do in this big race one year, and then the next year he would do it again, but on a cocktail of drugs, right? To see what would happen. And the guy he got to help him was the head of the Russian like USADA doping agency. And that's when it all broke, right? Making a documentary about cycling, and then it just broke the whole Russian doping, you know what I mean? All of that news, where it was just state governed and it was crazy, right? So it was a thing, a documentary about one thing, and then it just blew up into this big thing. And I know I've spoken about cycling for ages there, but right, this film, right? It was this lady. She wanted to look into her ancestry, right? Kind of discover. So, how far back does the Winthrops go? Like, who am I connected to? What's the family? Because her dad would tell her stories and everything like that. So she wanted to look into it. And then in the midst of all of this, then this big revelation comes. And it kind of switches into this other thing, right? So it's fascinating. And like, really, as well, this is it's a self-discovery kind of situation. I mean, she is, always talking about, and even her friend, he was like, oh, she would always talk about being a Winthrop, right? And what that means. And she was just like, to be for a philanthrial, hmm. Oh, to help society in a way, and just all of this stuff. And like, she has this, would have this idea of what it meant, right? Helping people, all of that jazz, right? But then what happens when you kind of discover that maybe you're not actually, completely related to this thing, right? What does that do to you? So there's a lot going on here. And I find it interesting because for me, right, like you look at these situations, and like there's a lot of times when you hear about someone and like, oh, on my, say 50th birthday, I found out that, I was adopted, and it just shook my world and blah blah blah. And I always looked at it like, why? Right? Why would that do that to you? Because for all the years leading up to that point, you'd been loved, right? You'd been cared for. You had these close connections. So to find out that maybe your parents weren't your biological, does that really matter when they've done everything for you up to that point, right? Treated you like you were their biological kid, right? So it was interesting to see and watch someone go through this process, right? Because, she's traveling all over the place, goes to England, right? Because her dad, he grew up in France, spent many years in France, during the war, right? Which, during the occupation and just all of that kind of stuff, right? So he's got, she's got his diaries and, all the tales he used to tell of, watching the changing of the color and visiting, the Buckingham Palace and just seeing all of these things. So she wanted to experience all of that, right? And, it kind of starts off with her relocating, right? Firstly, she moves in with her mum, right? She's you know she has a job working in a prison as chief dentist. They you know get rid of that role, so she decides to relocate. So she moves in to be close to her mum. Her mum's old, she wants to look after her. So she relocates. So we have that. So there's a lot of these life changes that she's going through. And then she decides to do this whole ancestry explanation. Um, and I was always curious about that because remember, probably what, a decade ago, that's when it suddenly became really big. People were giving these ancestry.com, and there's another one with a number in the name or something, right? But you were giving these things for Christmas, and it was just like, hey, let's all look into our family tree. And I never really got it. Never really got it. But I think that's when you got these TV shows, right? I think it was Ben Affleck was on one of these shows, and he found out that one of his ancestors was a plantation owner and had slaves. And I think the word was that he then made them like cut a load of footage because he was just like devastated that that's in the lineage, which is kind of crazy because that was generations ago. Doesn't define who you are, right? But yeah, she decides to do this thing, and that's when she starts these travels. So she goes to England, so she's going around there, meets Cecilia Heritage. A lot of genealogists help her along the way, and so she visits all of these places which are connected to the family, right? Places where the Winthrops started off, before they moved to New England, right? Then she goes to France, to see where her dad would have grown up, and cousins and all of this jazz grew up. Which you then learn stuff about that, just that, right? So a place called Pew, Pau, and for a moment it was like the hub of sport, which I've never heard of. Never knew that. So you're learning all of this stuff as she is discovering all of this stuff, and it's this. Oh, she's talking about. Oh, I felt proud, and she's meeting people from like country clubs where a relative used to frequent, and different things like that, right? There's a golf club, and they're all meeting her, and it's also kind of great. Like they're all meeting her like she's royalty. It's fascinating to see what people are attaching to a name. Because it's not like they're meeting her and be like, yo, we're hearing you're a world-class dentist. Oh, this is incredible. That's great. No. It's because she's connected to these people from the past, right? Which is interesting, but it's like these aren't your achievements, So like, but I think what we see is she's had issues. Now, isn't she's had issues, right? It's just like, I mean, growing up a single child and her mum constantly pushing her to be the best, and being like, oh, 100% isn't good enough, you could have done better, and if it's not perfect, you got to do it again. So she's kind of lived under this shadow a little bit. So you're seeing her kind of blossom in these situations, right? But then she gets a message that kind of shakes everything. And that's really interesting, right? And I think one of the crazy things about all of that is because, her mum knows she's doing the ancestry thing, right? Her mum knows she's going. So it's like you kind of think that there's certain conversations that may have been had at the beginning. You know what I mean? Like you'd think it would make sense, but they're not. So there's stuff that just suddenly comes out, and they're talking to the mum, and the mum's like, no comment, and you're thinking, oh, are we getting to the bottom of this? Like, how is this gonna go? Right? And so this whole story unfolds, right? And it's just having I think it's the Perez's talk about the thing. And it's interesting as well, right? Because there's a moment where, like, I think it's Lillian. She's like, oh, I don't know why she doesn't seem to accept us, like, because I love her and I think, and her daughter's just like, well, she's grown up differently, right? Different experiences, different interpretations of what love is. So you have to let someone kind of redefine that within themselves, And then so the one's just like, oh, I've never even thought of it like that, which is, another kind of crazy. Like, there's a lot of things that go on that I think you could take for granted, right? Be like, well, obviously someone would think this way, or, you're just meeting people for the first time. You're not going to be like, oh, I love you. You know what I mean? It's fascinating. Just these discoveries and realizations. And I think, we have her talking to her life coach throughout the documentary. So there's these things that she's coming to terms with, coming to grips with. So it is interesting watching all of this unfold, right? Watching these realizations, these acceptances, just all of this, I mean, one of the biggest things for me though was because I think from the poster, I couldn't really tell, but when you actually see it on screen and see it next to her mum and her dad, and you're just like, I mean, you look different, right? You look different. So, and to me, at first I was thinking, wow, is it Latino? You know what I mean? Like, is this a Mexican, South American? Like, what could it be? And when you find out, I'd be like, oh, interesting, right? But yeah, I find that fascinating that there was never that, right? That she never even thought, I do look different, right? Or just anyone around her said that thing. Because I mean, growing up where I grew up, you know what I mean? Like being the only motherfuckers that look like me, right? People said shit every fucking day, right? Every day. So it's very interesting seeing how other people grow up and the different experiences that they have. Like my friend Tash, completely different experience. Completely different experience. You know what I mean? Be like, she was just like, oh yeah, no, I can get people like shout racist shit at me every day. You know what I mean? Be like, wait, what? I thought that would happen to everyone. You know what I'm saying? So it's fascinating finding these things out. And I think, the Last of the Winthrops is really interesting. It's a fascinating story, and we get to see it all unfold. All unfold as Viviane, gets to experience it. And that is a trip. That's a trip. So, I mean, anyone who likes a good documentary, anyone that is fascinated by ancestry and just, all of these family tree kind of things, I think that you will be really just intrigued by this whole thing, this whole experience. So, yeah, people, Last of the Winthrops, available on all your favorite VODs. So, if this sounds like your kind of thing, if you may have gone through a similar experience, right? Or thinking of looking into your family tree, this could very well be something for you. AJ does it again.